The Vought F-8 Crusader was a single-engine, supersonic, carrier-based air superiority jet aircraft built by Vought for the United States Navy and the Marine Corps, replacing the Vought F7U Cutlass. After the Navy's disappointing experience with the Cutlass, the Crusader was referred to by some as Vaught's last chance after company founder Chance M. Vought. The first F-8 prototype was ready for flight in February 1955, and was the last American fighter with guns as the primary weapon, principally serving in the Vietnam War. The RF-8 Crusader was a photo-reconnaissance development and operated longer in U.S. service than any of the fighter versions. RF-8s played a crucial role in the Cuban Missile Crisis, providing essential low-level photographs impossible to acquire by other means. U.S. Naval Reserve units continued to operate the RF-8 until 1987. Design and development. In September 1952, the United States Navy announced a requirement for a new fighter. It was to have a top speed of Mach 1.2 at 30,000 ft with a climb rate of 25,000 foot per minute, and a landing speed of no more than 100 mph. Korean War experience had demonstrated that 0.50-inch machine guns were no longer sufficient, and as the result the new fighter was to carry a 20-ohm cannon. In response, the Vought team led by John Russell Clark, created the V-383. Unusual for a fighter, the aircraft had a high-mounted wing which necessitated the use of a fuselage-mounted short and light landing gear. The most innovative aspect of the design was the variable incidence wing, which pivoted by 7 degrees out of the fuselage on takeoff and landing. This afforded increased lift due to a greater angle of attack without compromising forward visibility because the fuselage stayed level. Simultaneously, the lift was augmented by leading-edge slats drooping by 25 degrees and inboard flaps extending to 30 degrees. The rest of the aircraft took advantage of contemporary aerodynamic innovations with area-ruled fuselage, all-moving stabilators, dogtooth notching at the wing folds for improved yaw stability, and liberal use of titanium in the airframe. Power came from the Pratt & Whitney J57 afterburning turbojet. The armament, as specified by the Navy, consisted primarily of 420-ohm autocannon. The Crusader happened to be the last U.S. fighter designed with guns as its primary weapon. They were supplemented with a retractable tray with 32 unguided Mk4/Mk40 folding fin aerial rocket, and cheek pylons for 2 guided AIM-9 Sidewinder air-to-air missiles. Vought also presented a tactical reconnaissance version of the aircraft called the V-382. Major competition came from the Grumman F-11 Tiger, the upgraded twin-engine McDonnell F-3H Demon, and lastly, the North American F-100 Super Sabre, hastily adapted to carrier use and dubbed the Super Fury. In May 1953, the Vought design was declared a winner, and in June, Vought received an order for 3 F-8U prototypes. The first prototype flew on March 25, 1955 with John Conrad at the controls. The aircraft exceeded the speed of sound during its maiden flight. The development was so trouble-free that the second prototype, along with the first production F-8U, flew on the same day, September 30, 1955. On April 4, 1956, the F-8U performed its first catapult launch from Forrestal. Crusader 3, in parallel with the F-8U-1s and -2s, the Crusader design team was also working on a larger aircraft with ever greater performance, internally designated as the V-401. Although the Vought F-8U Crusader 3 was externally similar to the Crusader and sharing with it such design elements as the variable incidence wing, the new fighter was significantly larger and shared few components. Operational history. Prototype F-8U-1s were evaluated by VX-3 beginning in late 1956, with few problems noted. Weapons development was conducted at Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake, and a China Lake F-8U-1 set a U.S. national speed record in August 1956. Commander Duke Windsor broke, and set a new level flight speed record of 1,015.428 mph on August 21, 1956, beating the previous record of 822 mph set by a USAF F-100. However, the world speed record of 1,132 mph, set by the British Fairey Delta II, on March 10, 1956, was not broken. An early F-8U-1 was modified as a photo-reconnaissance aircraft, becoming the first F-8U-1P, subsequently the RF-8A equipped with cameras rather than guns and missiles. On July 16, 1957, Major John H. Glenn, Jr., USMC, completed the first supersonic transcontinental flight in a F-8U-1P, flying from NAS Los Alamitos, California to Floyd Bennett Field, New York in 3 hours, 23 minutes and 8.3 seconds. First Fleet Operators, Air Development Squadron 3 was established in November 1948 and tasked with evaluating new and existing naval aircraft, equipment and methods and also developing tactics and procedures for these. VX-3 was one of the first units to receive the F-8U-1 in December 1956, and was the first to operate the type in April 1957, from the USS Franklin D. Roosevelt. VX-3 was the first unit to qualify for carrier operations, but several aircraft were lost in accidents, in several cases killing their pilots. The first Fleet Squadron to fly the Crusader was VF-32 at NAS Cecil Field, Florida, in 1957, deploying to the Mediterranean late that year on Saratoga. VF-32 renamed the squadron the Swordsman in keeping with the Crusader theme. The Pacific Fleet received the first Crusaders at NAS Moffett Field in Northern California, and the VF-154 Grand Slammers began their F-8 operations. Later in 1957, in San Diego, VMF-122 accepted the first Marine Corps Crusaders. In 1962, the Defense Department standardized military aircraft designations generally along Air Force lines. Consequently, the F-8U became the F-8, with the original F-8U-1 redesignated F-8A. Fleet service, the Crusader became a day fighter operating off the aircraft carriers. At the time, U.S. Navy carrier air wings had gone through a series of day and night fighter aircraft due to rapid advances in engines and avionics. Some squadrons operated aircraft for very short periods before being equipped with a newer higher performance aircraft. The Crusader was the first post-Korean War aircraft to have a relatively long tenure with the fleet, and like the USAF Republic F-105 Thunderchief, a contemporary design, might have stayed in service longer if not for the Vietnam War and resulting attrition from combat and operational losses. Cuban Missile Crisis. The unarmed Crusader was operated aboard carriers as a detachment from either VFP-62 or VFP-63 to provide photo-reconnaissance capability, as RF-8A proved ideal for the task of getting low-altitude detailed photographs. During the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, RF-8As flew extremely hazardous low-level photo-reconnaissance missions over Cuba, with overflights beginning on October 23, 1962. These were the first true operational flights of the F-8 Crusader. Flights of RF-8As, operating in several pairs of aircraft, with each pair assigned a different target, left Key West twice each day, to fly over Cuba at low level, then returned to Jacksonville, where the film was offloaded and developed, to be rushed north to the Pentagon. These flights confirmed that the Soviet Union was setting up IRBMs in Cuba. The RF-8As also monitored the withdrawal of the Soviet missiles. To keep score after an overflight, each aircraft was given a stencil of a dead chicken. The overflights went on for about 6 weeks and returned a total of 160,000 images. The pilots who flew the missions all received Distinguished Flying Crosses, while VFP-62 received the prestigious U.S. Navy Unit Commendation. Mishap rate. The Crusader was not an easy aircraft to fly, and was often unforgiving in carrier landings, where it suffered from yaw instability, and the poorly designed, castering nose undercarriage made steering on the deck problematic. It earned a reputation as an ensign killer during its early service introduction. The nozzle and air intake was so low when the aircraft was on the ground or the flight deck that the crews called the aircraft the Gator. Not surprisingly, the Crusader's mishap rate was relatively high compared to its contemporaries, the Douglas A-4 Skyhawk and the F-4 Phantom II. However, the aircraft did possess some amazing capabilities, as proved when several Crusader pilots took off with the wings folded. One of these episodes took place on August 23, 1960. A Crusader with the wings folded took off from Napoli Capodichino in full afterburner, climbed to 5,000 ft and then returned to land successfully. The pilot, absent-minded but evidently a good stick man, complained that the control forces were higher than normal. The Crusader was capable of flying in this state, though the pilot would be required to reduce aircraft weight by ejecting stores and fuel prior to landing. In all, 1,261 Crusaders were built. By the time it was withdrawn from the fleet, 1,106 had been involved in mishaps. Only a handful of them were lost to enemy fire in Vietnam. Vietnam War. When conflict erupted in the skies over North Vietnam, it was U.S. Navy Crusaders from the USS Hancock that first tangled with Vietnam People's Air Force MiG-17s on April 3, 1965. Although the MiGs claimed the downing of a Crusader, Lieutenant Vought F-8's gun camera revealed that his cannons had set an F-8 ablaze, but Lieutenant Commander Spence Thomas had managed to land his damaged Crusader at Da Nang. The remaining F-8s returned safely to their carrier. At the time, the Crusader was the best dogfighter the United States had against the nimble North Vietnamese MiGs. The U.S. Navy had evolved its night fighter role in the air wing to an all-weather interceptor, the F-4 Phantom II, equipped to engage incoming bombers at long range with missiles such as AIM-7 Sparrow as their sole air-to-air weapons, and maneuverability was not emphasized in their design. Some experts believe that the era of the dogfight was over as air-to-air missiles would knock down adversaries well before they could get close enough to engage in dogfighting. As aerial combat ensued over North Vietnam from 1965 to 1968, it became apparent that the dogfight was not over and the F-8 Crusader and a community trained to prevail in air-to-air combat was a key ingredient to success. The Crusader also became a bomb truck in war, with both ship-based U.S. Navy units and land-based U.S. Marine Corps squadrons attacking Communist forces in both North and South Vietnam. USMC Crusaders flew only in the South, while U.S. Navy Crusaders flew only from the small Essex-class carriers. Marine Crusaders also operated in close air support missions. Despite the last gunfighter moniker, the F-8s achieved only 4 victories with their cannon. The remainder were accomplished with AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles, partly due to the propensity of the 20-on Colt Mk-12 cannon's feeding mechanism to jam under G-loading during high-speed dogfighting maneuvers. Between June and July 1966, during 12 engagements over North Vietnam, Crusaders shot down 4 MiG-17s for 2 losses. The Crusader would be credited with the best kill ratio of any American type in the Vietnam War, 19-3. Of the 19 aircraft shot down during aerial combat, 16 were MiG-17s and 3 were MiG-21s. U.S. records only indicate 3 F-8s lost in aerial combat, all to MiG-17 cannon fire in 1966, but the NVAF claimed 11 F-8s were shot down by MiGs. A total of 170 F-8 Crusaders would be lost to all causes during the war. F-8 pilots credited with shooting down North Vietnamese aircraft. Twilight service with U.S. Navy. LTV built and delivered the 1,219th U.S. Navy Crusader to VF-124 at NAS Miramar on September 3, 1964. The last active-duty Navy Crusader fighter variants were retired from VF-191 and VF-194 aboard Riscani in 1976 after almost 2 decades of service, setting a first for a Navy fighter. The photo-reconnaissance variant continued to serve in the active-duty Navy for yet another 11 years, with VFP-63 flying RF-8GS up to 1982, and with the Naval Reserve flying their RF-8GS in 2 squadrons at Naval Air Facility Washington/Andrews AFB until the disestablishment of VFP-306 in 1984 and VFP-206 on March 29, 1987 when the last operational Crusader was turned over to the National Air and Space Museum. The F-8 Crusader is the only aircraft to have used the AIM-9C, which is a radar-guided variant of the Sidewinder. When the Crusader retired, These missiles were converted to the AGM-122 sidearm anti-radiation missiles used by United States attack helicopters to knock out enemy radars. NASA. Several modified F-8s were used by NASA in the early 1970s, proving the viability of both digital fly-by-wire and supercritical wings. French Navy. When the French Navy's air arm, the copyright Rhônevale, required a carrier-based fighter in the early 1960s to serve aboard the new carriers Clemenceau and Foch, the F-4 Phantom, then entering service with the United States Navy, proved to be too large for the small French ships. Following carrier trials aboard Clemenceau on March 16, 1962, by two VF-32 F-8s from the American carrier Saratoga, the Crusader was chosen and 42 F-8E, FN-S were ordered, the last Crusaders produced. The French Crusaders were based on the F-8E, but were modified in order to allow operations from the small French carriers, with the maximum angle of incidence of the aircraft's wing increased from 5 to 7 degrees and blown flaps fitted. The aircraft's weapons system was modified to carry two French Matra of 530 radar or infrared missiles as an alternative to Sidewinders, although the ability to carry the American missile was retained. Deliveries started in October 1964 and continued until February 1965, with the copyright Rhônevale's 1st Squadron, Flotille 12F reactivated on October 1, 1964. To replace the old Corsairs, Flotille 14F received its Crusaders on March 1, 1965. In October 1974, and June 1977, Crusaders from 14F Squadron participated in the SAFER missions over Djibouti. On May 7, 1977, two Crusaders went separately on patrol against supposedly French Air Force F-100 Super Sabres stationed at Djibouti. The leader intercepted two fighters and engaged a dogfight but quickly called his wingman for help as he had actually engaged two Yemeni Miqwa-Giravik MiG-21s. The two French fighters switched their master armament to on, but, ultimately, everyone returned to their bases. This was the only combat interception by French Crusaders. The copyright Rhônevale Crusaders flew combat missions over Lebanon in 1983 escorting Dassault Briguet Super Permel-tended strike aircraft. In October 1984, France sent Foch for Operation Mermelin off the coast of Libya, intended to calm Colonel Gaddafi down, with 12F Squadron. The escalation of the situation in the Persian Gulf, due to the Iran-Iraq conflict, triggered the deployment of Clemenceau Task Force and its air wing, including 12F Squadron. 1993 saw the beginning of the missions over ex-Yugoslavia. Crusaders were launched from both carriers cruising in the Adriatic Sea. These missions ceased in June 1999 with Operation Trident over Kosovo. The French Crusaders were subject to a series of modifications throughout their life, being fitted with new F-8J type wings in 1969 and having modified afterburners fitted in 1979. Armament was enhanced by the addition of R-550 Magic infrared-guided missiles in 1973, with the improved, all-aspect Magic II fitted from 1988. The obsolete R-530 was withdrawn from use in 1989, leaving the Crusaders without a radar-guided missile. In 1989, when it was realized that the Crusader would not be replaced for several years, it was decided to refurbish the Crusaders to extend their operating life. Each aircraft was rewired and had its hydraulic system refurbished, while the airframe was strengthened to extend fatigue life. Avionics were improved, with a modified navigation suite and a new radar warning receiver. The 17 refurbished aircraft were redesignated as F-8P. Although the French Navy participated in combat operations in 1991 during Operation Desert Storm and over Kosovo in 1999, the Crusaders stayed behind and were eventually replaced by the Rafale M in 2000 as the last of the breed in military service. Philippine Air Force. By the 1970s the Philippine government was looking into upgrading their air force's capabilities. Various aircraft were considered, including the F-4 Phantom and F-15 Eagle. However, the local U.S. military mission doubted the government's ability to afford these fighters, and assessed the Philippine Air Force as incapable of operating and maintaining complex aircraft. In addition, due to the levels of corruption that existed in the country at the time, the Americans had doubts on their allies' ability to properly secure technologically sensitive spare parts and related equipment. Therefore, as a compromise, the Philippine government was offered 35 second-hand U.S. Navy F-8HS that were stored at Davis Monthan AFB in Arizona in late 1977. 25 of them were refurbished by Vought and the remaining 10 were used for spare parts. As part of the deal, the U.S. would train Philippine pilots on using the TF-8A. They were mostly used for intercepting Soviet bombers. However, poor maintenance meant that availability rates steadily declined, and by 1988 all the aircraft were grounded. The surviving F-8 Crusaders were finally withdrawn from service in 1991 after they were badly damaged by the Mount Pinatubo eruption, and have since been offered for sale as scrap. Variants: XF-8U-1 the two original unarmed prototypes, V383. F-8U-1 first production version, J57P12 engine replaced with more powerful J57P4A starting with 31st production aircraft, 318 built. YF-8U-1 1 F-8U-1 fighter used for development testing. YF-8U-1E 1 F-8U-1 converted to serve as an F-8U-1E prototype. F-8U-1E added a limited all-weather capability thanks to the ANAPS-67 radar. The unguided rocket tray was sealed shut because it was never used operationally. First flight, September 3, 1958, 130 built. XF-8U-1 1 XF-8U-2 used for evaluation as a two-seat trainer. F-8U-1 two-seat trainer version based on F-8U-2 fuselage stretched to FT, internal armament reduced to 2 cannon, J57P20 engine. First flight February 6, 1962. The Royal Navy was initially interested in the Rolls-Royce Spey-powered version of TF-8A but chose the Phantom II instead. Only one TF-8A was built, although several retired F-8s were converted to similar two-seat trainers, V408. YF-8U-2 two F-8U-1s used for flight testing the J57P16 turbojet engine. F-8U-2 J57P16 engine with 16,900 pound force of afterburning thrust, ventral fins added under the rear fuselage in an attempt to rectify yaw instability, Y-shaped chin pylons allowing two Sidewinder missiles on each side of the fuselage, ANAPQ-83 radar retrofitted during later upgrades. First flight, August 20, 1957, 187 built. This variant was sometimes referred to as Crusader II, F-8U-2 all-weather version, unguided rocket pack replaced with an additional fuel tank, J57P20 engine with 18,000 pound force of afterburning thrust, landing system which automatically maintained present airspeed during approach, incorporation of ANAPQ-83 radar. First flight, February 16, 1960, 152 built. YF-8U-2 1 aircraft used in the development of the F-8U-2N. YF-8U-2 1 F-8U-1 converted to serve as an F-8U-2 prototype. F-8U-2 J57P20A engine, ANAPQ-94 radar in a larger nose cone, dorsal hump between the wings containing electronics for the AGM-12 Bullpup missile, payload increased to 5,000 lb. Martin Baker ejection seat, ANAPQ-94 radar replaced ANAPQ-83 radar in earlier F-8D. IRST sensor blister was added in front of the canopy. First flight, June 30, 1961, 286 built. F-8E, FN, a Euro air superiority fighter version for the French Navy, significantly increased wing lift due to greater slat and flap deflection and the addition of a boundary layer control system, enlarged stabilators, incorporated ANAPQ-104 radar, an upgraded version of ANAPQ-94. A total of 42 built. F-8 hours a Euro upgraded F-8D with strengthened airframe and landing gear, with ANAPQ-84 radar. A total of 89 rebuilt. F-8J a Euro upgraded F-8E, similar to F-8D but with wing modifications and BLC like on F-8E, FN, wet pylons for external fuel tanks, J-57P-20A engine, with AN/APQ-124 radar. A total of 136 rebuilt. F-8Ka Euro upgraded F-8C with bullpup capability and J-57P-20A engines, with AN/APQ-125 radar. A total of 87 rebuilt. F-8LA Euro F-8B upgraded with underwing hardpoints, with AN/APQ-149 radar. A total of 61 rebuilt. F-8PA Euro 17 F-8E, FN, of the or copyright Rhône-Naval underwent a significant overhaul at the end of the 1980s to stretch their service life another 10 years. They were retired in 1999. F-8U-1DA Euro several retired F-8A modified to controller aircraft for testing of the SSMN-8 Regulus cruise missile. DF-8A was also modified as drone control which were used extensively by VC-8, NS Roosevelt Rhodes, PR. Atlantic Fleet Missile Range. DF-8FA Euro retired F-8A modified as controller aircraft for testing of missiles including at the USN facility at China Lake. F-8U-1KU Euro retired F-8A modified into remote-controlled target drones, while F-8U-1PA Euro prototypes used in the development of the F-8U-1P photo-reconnaissance aircraft, V-392. F-8U-1PA Euro unmanned photo-reconnaissance version of F-8U-1E, 144 built. RF-8GA Euro modernized RF-8 as LTVV 100 Euro revised low-cost development based on the earlier F-8 variants, created in 1970 to compete against the F-4E Phantom II, Lockheed CL-1200 and F-5-21 in a tender for U.S. military assistance program funding. The unsuccessful design was ultimately only a paper exercise. F-8 Crusader 3 Euro new design loosely based on the earlier F-8 variants, created to compete against the F-4 Phantom II. J-75P-5A engine with 29,500 pound force of afterburning thrust, first flight, June 2, 1958, attained Mach 2.39 in test flights, cancelled after 5 aircraft were constructed because the Phantom II won the Navy contract, V401. Operators: A France, French Navy, A Philippines, Philippine Air Force, A United States Navy, United States Marine Corps, NASA, aircraft on display. XF-8U-1, 138,899, Museum of Flight in Seattle, Washington. XF-8U-2, 140,448, McAuliffe Shepard Discovery Center in Concord, New Hampshire. F-8U-1, 141,351, NAS Jacksonville Heritage Park, Naval Air Station Jacksonville, Florida, 143,703, USS Hornet Museum, former NAS Alameda, Alameda, California, 143,755, Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, California, 144,427, Palmer Air and Space Museum adjacent to Davis-Monthan AFB in Tucson, Arizona, 145,336, Plains of Fame at Chino, California, 145,347, National Museum of Naval Aviation at Naval Air Station Pensacola, Florida. F-8U-1T, 141,353, Edwards AFB, California. F-8U-1E, 143,806, Wings of Freedom Aviation Museum, former Naval Air Station Willow Grove, Pennsylvania. F-8U-2, 146,939, Patriots Point Naval and Maritime Museum aboard ex-USS Yorktown, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. 146,963, Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort, South Carolina. 146,973, Marine Corps Air Station Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii. 146,995, Pacific Coast Air Museum, adjacent to the Sonoma County Airport in Santa Rosa, California, 147,030, USS Midway Museum in San Diego, California, 147,034, Hurlong Airport, Jacksonville, Florida, 149,150, NAS Oceana Aviation Heritage Park, Naval Air Station Oceana, Virginia, 150,904, Air Zoo in Kalamazoo, Michigan. F-8U-2N, 148,693, Mid-America Air Museum in Liberal, Kansas. F-8U-1P, 144,617, Flying Leatherneck Aviation Museum at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, California, 146,860, Smithsonian Institution's National Air and Space Museum at Voorhees Center in Chantilly, Virginia, adjacent to Dulles International Airport, 146,882, Frontiers of Flight Museum in Dallas, Texas. 146,898, Fort Worth Aviation Museum in Fort Worth, Texas. 146,931, Estrella Warbirds Museum in Paso Robles, California, 150,920, Flying Leatherneck Aviation Museum at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, California, F-8 Hours, 147,909, NAD Sir Optimist Park, Kitsap Lake, Bremerton, Washington, about 1 mile away from Naval Hospital Bremerton. Aircraft is on loan from the National Naval Aviation Museum, Pensacola, Florida. F-8U-2, 145,550, USS Intrepid Museum in New York City, New York, 146,985, Valiant Air Command Warbird Museum at Space Coast Regional Airport in Titusville, Florida, F-8P, French Navy Side No. 19, Musée Copyright des Anciens. Toulouse, France, Specifications. Data from the Great Book of Fighters and Quest for Performance Combat Aircraft since 1945. General characteristics, crew, 1, payload, 5,000 pounds of weapons, length, 54 feet 3 inches, wingspan, 35 feet 8 in, height, 15 feet 9 in, wing area, 375 FTA squared, airfoil, NACA 65A006 mod root, NACA 65A005 mod tip, aspect ratio, 3.421, empty weight, 17,541 pounds, loaded weight, 29,000 pounds, power plant, 1 Pratt & Whitney. J57P20A afterburning turbojet, dry thrust, 10,700 pound forces, thrust with afterburner, 18,000 pound forces. Zero lift drag coefficient, 0.0133, drag area, 5.0 FTA squared, fuel capacity, 1,325 AUS/gal, performance, maximum speed, Mach 1.86 at 36,000 feet, cruise speed, 570 miles per hour, combat radius, 450 miles, ferry range, 1,735 miles with external fuel, service ceiling, 58,000 feet, rate of climb, 31,950 feet per minute, wing loading, 77.3 pounds FTA squared, thrust weight, 0.62. Lift to drag ratio, 12.8, armament, guns, 4 20 mm Colt Mk12 cannons in lower fuselage, 125 RPG, hardpoints, 2 side fuselage mounted Y pylons and 2 underwing pylon stations holding up to 4,000 pounds of payload, rockets 2 LAU-10 rocket pod Zuni rockets. Missiles, air-to-air missiles, 4 AIM-9 Sidewinder or Maitre Magic of French Navy. Air-to-surface missiles, 2 AGM-12 Bullpup. Bombs, 12 250 pounds Mark 81 bombs or 8 500 pounds Mark 82 bombs or 4 1,000 pounds Mark 83 bombs or 2 2,000 pounds Mark 84 bombs. Avionics, Magnavox AN/APQ-84 or AN/APQ-94 fire control radar, see also. Related development, LTVA-7 Crusader 2, Vought F-8 Crusader 3, Vought YA-7F, aircraft of comparable role, configuration and era, Grumman F-11 Tiger, North American F-100 Super Sabre, related lists, list of fighter aircraft, list of military aircraft of the United States, references, notes. Bibliography. External links, Vought Jets photos on Vought.com, F-8 Crusader fact sheet on globalsecurity.org, F-8 Crusader at Greg Goebel's Air Vectors, first F-8U carrier operations webpage, 1968, NAVAIR-01-45HHB1 Tops Flight Manual Navy Model F-8D, F-8E aircraft, 1978, NAVAIR-01-45HHB1 Tops Flight Manual Navy Model RF-8G aircraft,